What happens when a man who spent decades running from his past finally comes face to face with it on live television under the blinding lights of Good Morning America? The sun hasn't even fully risen over Times Square, but inside the studio everything already glows. Too bright, too perfect, too calm. The cameras hum quietly. The air buzzes with the faint electricity of pre-show nerves. Makeup artists retreat. Producers murmur final notes into earpieces. A hush falls over the set, rehearsed and deliberate, like silence pretending not to know what's coming. Then the doors open, and in walks Mark Wahlberg, tailored jacket, crisp shirt, that easy Boston swagger polished by 20 years of Hollywood discipline. He looks every bit the movie star, smile sharp, handshake firm, energy contained but confident. He's here to talk about his new action thriller, another bullet-riddled, high-octane story of redemption and grit. For him, this is supposed to be routine, a friendly stop on the promo circuit, a quick chat before catching a flight to the next city. Across the studio, George Stephanopoulos waits behind his desk, notes spread neatly before him like a prosecutor arranging evidence. His expression is composed, but his eyes hold something colder. When Mark enters the frame, George rises with that trademark network smile, the kind that never quite reaches his eyes. "Mark, welcome back to Good Morning America," he says, voice smooth as glass. Mark returns the grin, adjusting his jacket, playing along with the rhythm he knows so well. "Thanks for having me, George. Always good to be here." His tone is calm, relaxed, warm enough to charm, but never vulnerable. The two men shake hands. Cameras adjust focus. The red light above the lens blinks on. On the monitors behind the crew, a perfect image appears. Two professionals exchanging pleasantries under the soft glow of studio lights. But beneath the surface, something feels off. The air is a little too still. The smiles linger a little too long. Somewhere behind the glass wall of the control room, a producer gives a subtle signal, and Stephanopoulos glances down at his notes. Wahlberg doesn't see it, but he senses something, an almost imperceptible shift in the room's temperature. He sits, body angled toward the camera, posture impeccable. But there's tension in his shoulders now, faint but real, as if his instincts, those survival instincts from a rougher Boston past, are whispering that this won't be the easy conversation he expected. George crosses one leg over the other, pen in hand, ready to begin. His tone stays warm, professional, rehearsed, but the rhythm feels strange. Each pause lasts a moment too long. Each smile edges with something sharper. Wahlberg answers with practiced ease, talking about his co-stars, the stunts, the message of redemption in the film. The crew nods. The live audience chuckles politely. Yet underneath the banter, there's a hum of unease, growing like static before a storm. Cameramen exchange looks. A producer folds her arms tightly across her chest. No one says it, but everyone feels it. Something is about to shift. Mark leans back, flashing that disarming grin. "You know, George, this movie is all about second chances," he says, unaware of the irony threading through the air. Stephanopoulos tilts his head, smile tightening by a fraction. His fingers tap once against his cards. Outside, the city awakens, horns, sirens, the morning rush. Inside, the sound barely penetrates the sealed world of light and control. Mark laughs at something George says, but it doesn't reach his eyes. There's a heaviness now, faint but unmistakable. For the audience at home, it's just another cheerful morning interview. But for those in the room, the crew, the producers, and Mark himself, the air feels charged, unstable, like the instant before a storm when even silence feels loud. Mark adjusts his microphone, a faint smile lingering. Deep down, a realization takes root. This doesn't feel like a promo anymore. It feels like a setup, a trial about to begin. The cameras keep rolling. The host keeps smiling. But Wahlberg can feel it now, the tension rising in invisible waves curling around him like smoke. The calm before the storm. The first few minutes glide by smoothly, practiced rhythms of questions and answers, smiles and laughter real enough to fool anyone not paying attention. George asks about the film's message, about redemption, about flawed heroes. Mark nods, speaking in the confident cadence of a man who's told his story 100 times. Then, without warning, George shifts forward, tone soft but words sharp like a knife hidden behind velvet. "Mark," he says almost casually, "since we're talking about redemption, let's talk about your past." The studio air changes instantly. The hum of the cameras becomes deafening. Wahlberg blinks, the smile still on his face but frozen now. He's heard that sentence before countless times, but never like this. Never on live TV with millions watching. George continues, calm and deliberate. Specifically, let's talk about the incidents from your youth. The ones people say you've never truly addressed. For a split second, Mark doesn't move. Then he shifts in his seat, straightening his jacket, the motion automatic. His jaw tightens. His tongue presses against his teeth before he answers. George, he says evenly, I thought we were here to talk about the new film. A pause. The kind that stretches seconds into hours. George doesn't blink. We will, he replies. But don't you think the public deserves to hear more about how you've made amends for those mistakes? Mistakes, the word lands heavy. Wahlberg takes a slow breath through his nose, fighting the instinct to push back too soon. He's been trained for this. Media coaching, crisis management. The 1,000 rehearsed lines meant to neutralize landmines like this one. I've spoken about my past many times, he says, voice steady, measured. I was a kid who made terrible choices. I've spent my adult life working to make things right. George nods politely but doesn't look convinced. His pen taps once against the desk. But Mark, he presses. Some people think that just talking about it isn't enough. That maybe, just maybe, you haven't really taken full responsibility. That's when the first crack appears in Mark's composure. His smile fades. The muscles in his jaw flex. On the monitors, the camera tightens its frame, zooming in just slightly on his face, close enough to catch the flicker of irritation behind his eyes. The crew senses it too. A camera operator glances at the floor manager, who shakes her head slowly. Keep rolling. No interruptions, no cuts. Mark leans forward now, elbows on his knees, trying to regain control. With all due respect, George, I've owned what I did, he says, his voice calm but with the Boston edge creeping in. I've apologized. I've worked with victims. I've tried to do better every day since. But George doesn't let him finish. Still, he interrupts gently. Don't you think people want more than words? These weren't teenage pranks, Mark. These were serious incidents that hurt real people. Isn't there more you could do? It's no longer an interview. It's cross-examination. Every word lands like evidence presented in a courtroom. Wahlberg's hands grip the arms of his chair, knuckles whitening. His breathing slows, measured, deliberate. Somewhere in the control room, a producer mutters under their breath, he's pushing too hard. Another voice answers, keep it going. This is good TV. Mark looks at George now, not the host, but the man behind the questions. And something in his eyes changes. The friendliness drains away, replaced by cold focus. He realizes it. This isn't about the movie. It never was. The set, the cameras, the lights, they're not for promotion. They're for prosecution. And as the silence stretches between them, heavy and electric, Wahlberg feels the truth settle like a weight on his chest. He's not sitting in an interview chair. He's sitting in a witness stand. The silence after George's last question lasts too long. Even through the noise of the studio equipment, you can hear the low thrum of tension, like the air itself is waiting to see what Mark will do. He shifts his weight, eyes flicking from the host to the camera lens, calculating, breathing slow, steady. When he finally speaks, his voice is low but sharp. I've been open about my past for years, George. I've said what needed to be said. I was a kid who made terrible mistakes. I've spent my entire life trying to make it right. George doesn't miss a beat. But see, that's the thing, he says, leaning forward, tone calm, surgical. What you call mistakes, others might call crimes. Real people were hurt, Mark. It's not just about whether you've said the right words. It's about whether you've ever truly taken responsibility. The words hit like a slap. Wahlberg's jaw flexes, his hands gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles pale. He exhales through his nose, fighting to keep his composure. I've taken responsibility every single day, he says quietly. But the heat beneath the words is unmistakable. I've owned what I did. I've apologized. I've given back. I've worked with kids who were just like me, kids who needed a second chance. George tilts his head slightly, that polished TV host poise masking something colder. But that's not the same as accountability, is it? He asks softly. Some would say it's just damage control, a way to polish your image after what happened. A low murmur ripples through the crew. The camera tightens on Mark's face. You can see it. The slight tremor at the corner of his mouth, the muscle in his temple twitching. He laughs once under his breath, the sound hollow. You think this is about image? You think I spent 30 years doing charity for headlines? George doesn't answer. He just waits. Pen tapping against his cards, eyes locked on Wahlberg's face. It's a power move. The kind of pause that forces your opponent to fill the silence. Mark swallows hard, his voice rising slightly now. A hint of that unmistakable Boston grit cutting through the polish. Listen, I've never hidden from my past. I've talked about it in interviews, documentaries, with the people I hurt. I've worked my ass off to be better. I'm not that kid anymore. George's response lands like a verdict. But the victims, you talk about them in the abstract. You use words like mistakes and better. Do you ever think about what they're still living with? What it's like to carry those scars while you're living in a mansion in Beverly Hills? Wahlberg's eyes flash. His voice hardens. I think about it every damn day, he says. Words clipped, deliberate. You think I don't? You think it doesn't haunt me? The exchange is no longer a conversation. It's a duel. Every line fired like a bullet, every pause loaded with meaning. The studio lights burn hotter. You can see the sheen of sweat beginning to form on Mark's forehead. Across the country, viewers at home lean forward in their seats, coffee cups forgotten. They can feel it too. The rawness, the danger, the way this glossy morning show has turned into something else entirely. This isn't just an interview anymore. It's a reckoning. George presses again, voice firm now, almost accusatory. So you've changed, you've evolved, you've moved on. But tell me, Mark, do you really believe time erases accountability? Does success cancel out what you did? Mark's breathing quickens, his shoulders rising and falling. I've paid for it, he insists, louder now. I've paid for it 1,000 times over. You don't know what it's like to wake up every morning carrying that guilt. George's eyes narrow. Maybe not, he says evenly. But I do know that 45 days in jail doesn't sound like justice to a lot of people. The words hang in the air, heavy and merciless. The studio goes dead silent. Even the cameras seem to hold their breath. Wahlberg stares at George, his mouth half open, no words coming. His face tightens, eyes darkening, and for a moment something dangerous flashes across his expression. A storm gathering behind the calm. He doesn't speak. He just sits there, jaw clenched. The silence stretching longer than it should. The audience watching at home doesn't know it yet. But they've just witnessed the exact second the interview stops being controllable. It's the pause before the explosion. For a few long seconds, Mark just sits there, the question echoing in his head like a siren that won't stop. 45 days. Justice. The words loop louder each time until something inside him finally snaps. Without warning, he pushes back from the chair, the metal legs screeching across the studio floor as he shoots to his feet. The chair rolls backward, crashing into the backdrop. Every eye in the room jumps toward him. His face flushes crimson, veins rising along his neck. The mask of composure is gone. Are you out of your mind? Wahlberg's voice cracks through the air, thick with that unmistakable Boston grit. You think I haven't paid enough? You think I haven't spent 30 damn years paying for it? His words hit like shrapnel bouncing off the walls, vibrating through the microphones. The studio freezes. Stephanopoulos doesn't flinch. He stays seated, shoulders squared, voice measured, almost unnervingly calm. Call it justice, he says evenly. That's all anyone wants, Mark. Real accountability. The words are gasoline. Wahlberg's anger flares higher. Justice? He spits. You want to talk about justice, George? I've been living with this every day since I was 17. I have done everything I can to make things right. I've worked with at-risk kids. I've given millions to help people get out of the same hole I crawled out of. I've tried to show that you can change your life no matter where you start. His voice reverberates through the room, raw and shaking. The air feels heavy, electric. A couple of security guards at the edge of the set take cautious steps forward, ready but hesitant. Behind the cameras, a producer's voice cuts through the headsets, urgent and nervous. Keep rolling. Do not cut. This is history. Wahlberg's breathing is rough now, uneven, but he keeps going. His hands move as he speaks, gesturing hard, almost desperate. You sit there in your suit judging me from your perfect life, acting like I haven't owned up to what I did. I was a kid, George, a stupid, broken, angry kid. I didn't know better, but I've spent 3 decades trying to do better. Isn't that what this country's supposed to be about? Redemption? George watches him, expression unreadable. Then, with the precision of someone who knows exactly how to twist the knife, he replies, Redemption is earned, Mark. Not bought. You can't donate your way out of guilt. You can't buy back the pain you caused. The words land like a punch. Wahlberg takes a step forward, jaw locking tight, his hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from the effort of holding back everything inside him. That's not what I'm doing, he fires back. You don't get it. This isn't about image or PR or any of that crap. This is my life. I wake up every day trying to make sure I'm not that person anymore. George's eyes narrow, his tone cool, almost surgical. And yet here we are talking about it all over again. Maybe the problem isn't whether you've changed, Mark. Maybe it's that you still can't face what you did without making it about you. That does it. Wahlberg's head snaps up, eyes burning. His voice drops lower, quieter, but somehow more dangerous. You think you know me? You think you understand what it's like to live with this hanging over your head? You have no idea. None. The studio feels smaller now, like the walls are closing in. Even the cameras seem afraid to breathe. George doesn't move, but his grip on the edge of the desk tightens just slightly. The red light on the main camera blinks faster, as if it, too, senses what's coming. Mark steps back, rubbing his face, chest rising and falling fast. He tries to steady himself, but the anger won't go away. It's been building for years, every interview, every headline, every judgment from people who will never let him forget. It's all coming out now in this one moment, in front of millions of strangers. George leans forward, voice calm but sharp as ice. So tell me, Mark, if you've really changed. Why do you sound like the same angry kid defending himself instead of the man who's moved on? For a heartbeat, there's silence. Wahlberg stares at him, eyes wide as if the question itself has cut deeper than anything before. His breathing slows. His lips part, but no words come out. The studio lights catch his face, and red with fury, tight with frustration. But behind it all, something else flickers now. Something heavier. Regret, exhaustion, a sorrow that looks almost like surrender. He turns toward the main camera, chest heaving, eyes burning through the lens. For a long moment, he doesn't speak. He just stands there, glaring into the unblinking red light. For the first time that morning, millions watching at home can see it clearly. The fury, the pain, the shame, all of it colliding in one raw, unguarded stare. The movie star mask is gone. What's left is the man beneath it, exposed and breaking. The air itself seems to stop moving. Mark stands there, chest rising and falling, his breath echoing in the microphone. The heat of his anger fades just enough for something else to break through, a raw exhaustion settling in his shoulders. He looks down at his hands, flexes them once, then looks back up into the lights. His voice, when it comes, is quieter, lower, stripped of performance. You want the truth? He says, each word heavy. Fine. I'll give you the truth. He steps closer to the desk, the fury draining from his face, replaced by something far more dangerous. Honesty. I was 17, he says. 17. High out of my mind, angry at the whole damn world. I grew up around violence, poverty, addiction. I didn't see a way out. I didn't even believe there was one. So yeah, I hurt people. I did things I can't ever take back. I was stupid, reckless, and I was lost. The sound of his voice fills the studio. The crew has stopped moving. The clicking of cameras, the whispers in headsets, gone. Every person in the room is frozen, listening. Even Stephanopoulos leans back slightly, his confident posture softening for the first time. I've carried that weight my whole life, Wahlberg continues, voice rough, breaking at the edges. It doesn't go away. It doesn't matter how many movies I make or how much money I give away. You don't forget something like that. You don't forgive yourself. Not really. You just learn to live with it. He pauses, hands shaking slightly. The lights glint off the moisture in his eyes. And for a heartbeat, the tough exterior, the Hollywood polish, the action hero image, cracks wide open. The worst part isn't the jail time or the headlines or what people say about me, he says. The worst part is knowing that somewhere out there are people who still carry scars from what I did. Physical scars, emotional scars. And I can't fix that. I can't undo it. The silence that follows is absolute, the kind that presses against your skin. Stephanopoulos watches him carefully, almost uncertain. For a fleeting second, something like empathy flickers in his eyes. The journalist who came to interrogate is, for the first time, looking at a man instead of a headline. But it doesn't last. It never does. George clears his throat, his voice softer but still relentless. If you really feel that way, he says, If you carry that guilt, then why haven't you ever reached out to your victims directly? Why not make it personal instead of public? The question hangs in the air like smoke. Wahlberg's head turns sharply, the vulnerability vanishing in an instant. The warmth drains from his voice, replaced by something cold and precise. Because, George, he says quietly, this isn't just about me. You think it's that simple, that I can just pick up the phone and say sorry? You think the world would let that happen? George studies him, waiting. Wahlberg continues, tone flat, almost detached. My lawyers, my agents, my publicists, they've spent decades telling me not to. They say if I reach out, it opens up lawsuits, stories, people trying to cash in on guilt. That's the world we live in. Everything turns into a headline or a payout or a circus. The system doesn't want healing, George. It wants ratings. It wants control. The words come out sharp and bitter. But beneath the anger, there's something quieter. A sadness that seeps into every syllable. Stephanopoulos leans forward again, pen in hand, trying to regain his footing. So you're saying the system's to blame? That it's everyone else's fault you haven't made amends? Mark lets out a short, humorless laugh. I'm saying the world doesn't care about forgiveness. It just wants a villain to point at. I've lived long enough to know that. The studio remains still, the air heavy with unspoken truths. Wahlberg's eyes flick toward the camera, then back to George. For a second, neither man speaks. The tension doesn't break and it hardens, colder now. The confession is out. The truth is on the table, but there's no peace in it. No closure, just the bitter taste of honesty met with skepticism, regret met with judgment. Somewhere deep inside, Wahlberg knows it. No matter how much he says, no matter how real it gets, the world will never really let him be forgiven. For a few seconds, neither of them moves. The tension sits between them like a live wire, humming and dangerous. The confession has cracked something open that can't be sealed again, and both men know it. Stephanopoulos studies Wahlberg with the precision of a man who smells blood. His tone turns clinical, almost detached. So what you're really saying, George begins slowly, is that Hollywood has protected you, that it built a wall around you so you'd never have to face the full consequences of what you did. The words land hard. Wahlberg's face freezes, then darkens. A flicker of disbelief crosses his eyes, followed by fury. His hand slams against the arm of his chair, the sound cracking through the studio like a gunshot. The microphones catch every decibel. Someone in the control room gasps. That's not what I said. Wahlberg roars, his voice echoing across the set. Don't twist my words, George. Stephanopoulos doesn't back down. He leans in, calm but cutting. It sounds like that's exactly what you said. You're telling me your team, your agents, your lawyers, stopped you from making real amends. That sounds like protection to me. Wahlberg's breathing quickens. He steps closer to the desk, his shadow swallowing the space between them. You're unbelievable, he says, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. You sit there and act like you care about truth, but all you care about is spectacle. This isn't journalism. This is character assassination. His hand hits the desk again, harder this time. The impact rattles George's coffee mug, a small sound swallowed by the silence that follows. Stephanopoulos finally rises from his chair. The two men now stand eye to eye, the lights catching their faces, one tight with fury, the other cold with defiance. This isn't an ambush, Mark, George says, voice steady but clipped. It's an interview. If you can't handle tough questions, maybe you shouldn't be sitting here. Mark lets out a dry, bitter laugh that echoes through the studio. Oh, that's rich, he says. You call this journalism? You tricked me into coming here under false pretenses just to humiliate me on live television. Congratulations, George. You got your big moment. The tension is unbearable. A camera operator takes a cautious step back. A production assistant whispers, "Do we cut?" But no one answers. Wahlberg's voice drops low, trembling slightly. You think this is about tough questions? You think you're doing something noble? You're not. You're putting on a show. You're feeding the outrage machine, using my past to make people feel better about theirs. George's expression doesn't change. Or maybe, he says softly, I'm just asking what everyone's too afraid to ask. Maybe people deserve to see who you really are. Something in Wahlberg's face breaks, an expression of exhaustion mixed with disbelief. He shakes his head slowly, the anger curdling into something darker, sadder. Maybe you're right, he says quietly, almost to himself. Maybe I don't belong here anymore. Maybe I don't belong anywhere. The studio is so silent that even the hum of the air conditioning feels loud. George folds his arms, tone final and unyielding. "Maybe you shouldn't," he says. For a long moment, Wahlberg doesn't move. His chest rises and falls. His jaw tightens. The color drains from his face until only his eyes remain alive, cold, sharp, glinting under the harsh light. He looks at Stephanopoulos, then at the cameras. For the first time, the Hollywood shine is gone. No mask, no charm, no performance. Just a man standing in the ruins of his own legend, staring at the person who helped tear it down. The studio feels hollow now, as if the air's been sucked out of it. Neither man speaks. Stephanopoulos stands rigid behind his desk, face pale under the lights. Wahlberg doesn't blink. His once fiery eyes are now glassy, focused on nothing. Then, slowly and deliberately, he reaches up and pulls the wireless mic from his collar. The faint static crackles as he rips it free. He tosses it onto the desk with a sharp flick of his wrist. The mic bounces once, then lands near George's notes. The sound it makes is small but final, like a gavel coming down. "You got what you wanted," Wahlberg says, his voice low and rough. "You got your scandal. You got your ratings. You even got a piece of my soul. Congratulations." For a heartbeat, George opens his mouth to respond, but nothing comes out. Wahlberg turns away before he can find the words. His chair still lies on its side from earlier, a symbol of everything that's been broken. The crew doesn't move. Cameras keep rolling, instinct overriding reason. A producer in the control room whispers, "Cut to commercial." But no one dares. This is history, and they all know it. Security finally steps forward. 2 men in black earpieces moving in from the edge of the frame. Wahlberg glances at them and lets out a bitter, humorless laugh. "Don't worry," he says, waving them off. "I'm leaving." He walks off the set slowly, his footsteps echoing in the heavy silence. The camera follows him just long enough to capture the moment he passes through the studio doors. When they close behind him, the thud feels almost cinematic, a punctuation mark on a scene that should never have gone this far. Stephanopoulos inhales sharply, straightening his papers, his hands trembling slightly. He looks into the camera, forcing his professional voice to return. "We'll be right back," he says softly. "Go to commercial." The red light above the lens flicks off. The set goes quiet except for the hum of cooling equipment. Outside, the clip is already spreading. Within minutes, it's everywhere. Feeds, headlines, commentary. The hashtags multiply. Opinions ignite. Some call it bravery. Others call it a meltdown. But everyone is watching. Meanwhile, out on the street, Mark steps into the sunlight. The morning has fully bloomed, the city alive with noise. He squints against the brightness, his face drawn, his eyes distant. For the first time all morning, he isn't performing. He looks almost peaceful in a broken kind of way. A man stripped bare, both defeated and free. He takes a long, shaky breath, then walks away into the noise of New York, disappearing into the crowd. Back inside, the studio remains frozen, haunted by what just happened. And as the headlines begin to form, one question lingers, floating over every replay, every retweet, every heated debate that follows. Who was really on trial that morning?